The bowler hat guy from Meet the Robinsons. When an eccentric young boy named Lewis invents a machine that can show a vision of a past memory, the invention is stolen by a man known as the bowler hat guy, who attempts to pass it off as his own with help from his robot hat Doris. However, he doesn't know how to operate it, prompting him to find Lewis, who has gone 3 decades into the future. The best way to describe the bowler hat guy is that he is how to write a comedic villain, because every scene he is in is consistently funny with his eccentric, insane personality.
You're Mary Johnson.
Yes. Mary is short for,
Marion?
Can that be a boy name?
Yes.
Then yes.
I know that for most people, this kind of villain is just annoying to watch, but how can you not enjoy how goofy this guy is? He also has an interesting twist to him. It turns out he is the grown-up version of Lewis's roommate, Goob, who became bitter after Lewis kept him up all night working on the memory scanner and caused him to fall asleep while playing a baseball game. He was so engrossed by this inconvenience that he isolated himself from the world and eventually decided to plan revenge against Lewis. And on a second viewing of Meet the Robinsons, we do get a bit of foreshadowing to this twist, so it doesn't really feel like it comes out of nowhere.
Everyone will tell you to let it go and move on, but don't. Instead, let it fester and boil inside of you. Take these feelings and lock them away. Let them fuel your actions. Let hate be your ally, and you will be capable of wonderfully horrid things.
Sure, he's being petty about this whole mess, and this contrasts against the movie's theme of keep moving forward. But we shouldn't turn a blind eye to the fact that Lewis was so focused on making his invention that he didn't see how much it was affecting his roommate and didn't even try and keep in touch with him after he got adopted, serving as a lesson on how our behavior can affect others if we're not careful. His relationship with Doris is also pretty interesting because she serves as the brains of the bunch, who focuses more on pragmatic ways to capturing Lewis, while bowler hat guy uses more reckless methods upon doing so, like mind controlling a dinosaur from the past, which creates chaos among the Robinson family.
Bowler hat guy!
Him you can eat.
Lewis, run! Wilbur!
Do I have any criticisms for the bowler hat guy? I do, actually. For one thing, while I do sympathize with him given his backstory, the fact that he was so determined to destroy one person's life without considering how it might end up being disastrous to everything else around him, and only showing guilt when being shown the consequences of his actions, does feel like a last-minute redemption story. Sure, he runs away in remorse, feeling like he doesn't deserve a second chance, but you'd think he'd be sent to jail or something, though that blow is softened when Lewis actually wakes up Goob during his ballgame when everything has been resolved and Goob gets adopted, ensuring that he will have a better future. Second, there are times where I think maybe he gets too over the top and kind of slows the film down a little. Beyond those flaws though, the bowler hat guy is still a villain who you can't help but love because he's just so entertaining. The Doar 15, aka Doris from Meet the Robinsons. Doris was once a robot hat designed by Lewis, whose purpose was to be an assistant to humanity. However, she went rogue, escapes, and teams up with Goob to take down Lewis. Now, Doris doesn't have that much in terms of personality. She's an evil AI that's in a bowler hat who wants to threaten humanity. You know what we call that?
Cliché.
But I will admit that Disney really outdid themselves in terms of making something as mundane as a bowler hat be menacing. What Doris lacks in frightening appearance, she makes up for in cruel actions. She manipulates an adult Goob into stealing a time machine to ruin past Lewis's life and create a future where other robot hats like her reign supreme. Sure, she has a typical take-over-the-world motive, but the fact that she's a robot bowler hat makes this motive rather intriguing. Plus, the future where she enslaves humanity is quite scary, especially for a lighthearted film like Meet the Robinsons.
Why did I ever invent that stupid hat?
What drew me most to Doris was her countless robotic abilities, like being able to create legs for herself, long, scary arms with claws, and also able to create a miniature doppelganger of her for Goob to control.
Ooh, a mini Doris. I didn't even know you could do that. It's so cute.
To reiterate what I said a few moments ago, she serves as the true brains behind Goob. She's a lot smarter than him and thinks up of more pragmatic methods on how to dispose of Lewis. Oh, and she was even willing to dispose of Goob once he served his purpose. If I had to find criticisms of Doris besides the aforementioned cliches, it would have to be the fact that since Lewis created her going back in time to ruin his life is putting her own welfare in jeopardy. I won't go further than that because explaining it would bring out too many headaches. Doris is remarkable for being an evil robot hat, but she's cliched enough to justify being put this low. The Cheshire Cat from Alice in Wonderland. The Cheshire Cat is a mischievous inhabitant in Wonderland who enjoys messing with others like no tomorrow, and Alice becomes his new victim when meeting her. Now, this guy only has a handful of scenes, but boy does he make the most of them. He appears to Alice as this ally to vent her woes and frustrations to, but he turns out to be one heck of a bad Samaritan. He lures Alice to meet the funny but bothersome Mad Hatter and is even the one who leads her to the Queen of Hearts. Which, if you watched my last video or at least seen the film, you'd know how that ended up. I think the biggest appeal about the Cheshire Cat is the fact he speaks with a soft, smooth tone, all in thanks to his voice actor, who I will talk about in an entry that's not too far down on the list.
That depends on where you want to get to.
Plus, his disappearing reappearing bits do make for some great animation, especially for a film that came out in 1951. It's his role as a troublemaker and bad influence for Alice that I find to be the most interesting, because he lures Alice into scenarios where she gets into trouble, and he just rocks the boat just to see Alice suffer for his own sick amusement.
And, what were you saying, my dear?
Well, she simply said that you're a fat, pompous, bad-tempered old tyrant.
Also, like what I said about the Queen, since the whole movie takes place in Alice's dream, the Cheshire Cat seems to work great as a representation of Alice's mischievous side, and works well as a lesson for Alice to show her what happens when you don't take things seriously and cause trouble. The Cheshire Cat isn't without his criticisms, though. For starters, he is just merely a troublemaker and doesn't really have much beyond that characterization. Also, I found that Disney canceling out a song called I'm Odd, that they had planned for him to be a rather poor move, since it's a little catchy and fun.
My head begins to jingle most every time I nod, 'cause obviously, quite obviously, I'm odd.
The Cheshire Cat is a fun villain, no doubt about it, but could have had more work done on him rather than just be a troublemaker. Dawn Bellwether from Zootopia. Assistant Mayor Dawn Bellwether is the second in command of the city of Zootopia, a place filled with different types of mammals, working under the enigmatic Mayor Lionheart. She supports a newly appointed rabbit cop named Judy Hopps to find some missing mammals, which soon leads to her, and a conman fox named Nick Wilde to discover that some predator animals have turned savage, and that Mayor Lionheart has them imprisoned and isolated from the public to keep them from hurting anyone. Lionheart is arrested and Bellwether takes over as mayor. However, Judy and Nick later discover that Bellwether is the one behind this conspiracy due to having the predators be darted by drug flowers known as night howlers. Bellwether is certainly quite a twist villain, though that can be both a good and bad thing. Getting to the positives, Bellwether seems clever to use her position as deputy mayor to know the ins and outs of Zootopia in order for her scheme to go off. Her ram henchmen are also pretty terrifying for sheep.
Run.
Get them.
Also, I found her villain motives to be rather understandable. A prey animal who is constantly belittled by her predator boss. Yes, the movie isn't shy about its commentary on discrimination, but this is an example of what happens when you both let discrimination fuel your frustrations and refuse to see past someone's exterior. As for her downsides, I'd say the twist has little to no foreshadowing, which doesn't make for a good twist because there has to be some nuanced keys to open this door for the audience. Bellwether is mostly seen as a meek soul who is just harmless all around, with no way of showing that she has a more bitter side to her.
And clear my afternoon, I'm going out.
Oh, no, but sir, you do have a meeting with herds and grazing. Sir, if I could just go.
She also gloats to Judy about her villainous plan when she thinks she's drugged up Nick, which ends up being all the evidence Judy needs when they reveal it was all a joke and that Judy recorded her confession. Yes, Bellwether was sort of in a position where she thought she had nothing to lose, but you'd think that she'd at least be precautious enough to avoid outing herself like this. To conclude, Bellwether is a mixed bag in terms of a twist villain. She has her high points, but also her low points. Kaa from the Jungle Book. Kaa is a slimy python who has the ability to hypnotize both animals and humans into lowering their guard so that he can eat them. Now, in the grand scheme of the Jungle Book, Kaa is just another predator that Mowgli tries to avoid. Unlike a certain tiger who we'll get to later, he does have a supernatural ability to brainwash others. He has only 2 scenes, but for the most part, he doesn't stay longer than he needs to. I think it's his hypnotic powers that is most intriguing about Kaa because it cements him as a threat in more ways than one. The way he is able to hypnotize anyone into going into a mindless state is pretty frightening, especially in regards to his villain song, Trust in Me.
Trust in me, just in me.
The great Sterling Holloway, who voiced many great characters during the old days of Disney, was an excellent casting choice because he gives Kaa a soft, seductive tone that you normally don't hear in an animated villain from those days. Kaa is also very funny as nearly every scene he is in has him be the victim of some kind of slapstick humor. Those are all my positives though, because as I said before, Kaa doesn't get a whole lot of scenes. Heck, the scene where he chats with Shere Khan is actually a little boring to sit through as we see 2 villains in the Jungle Book talk about Mowgli with Kaa hiding him from Khan. And it doesn't help that he disappears from the movie when Mowgli escapes him a second time. Kaa is a pretty memorable part of the Jungle Book. I just wish the movie did a little more with him. Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians. Cruella is a fashion designer who longs for her old schoolmate's pet Dalmatian's offspring to make a fur coat out of. When her husband Roger turns her down, she has 2 clumsy felons named Horace and Jasper Baden dognap the Dalmatian kids and brings them to her mansion alongside a bunch of other Dalmatian pups that she has acquired. Now, Cruella has gone down in history as one of the best Disney villains ever, as folks everywhere has took to her diva personality and eccentric tendencies. To me personally, I find her to be a little overrated. Don't get me wrong, I do find her entertaining, but not to the point where I say she has a lot of rewatch value. I guess most of this has to do with the fact that she is mostly a corrupt businessperson, a stereotype that we've seen in a majority of animated family films. I also wouldn't say that her villainy is all that impressive, because most of the time, it's Jasper and Horace who do all the hard work and she only bosses them around like a gym coach to their students.
You got any chloroform?
Not a drop. And no ether. Either.
Having said all that though, I do think that Cruella has some traits that I find appealing. For starters, Roger's song that paints Cruella as this being of cruelty is very fun to listen to.
Cruella de Vil, Cruella de Vil. If she doesn't scare you, no evil thing will.
Plus, her design as a creepy-looking middle-aged woman does sort of show how much of an awful person she is, complete with her smoking a cigarette in almost every scene she's in, which explains a lot about her appearance. Also, when Cruella finally decides to take action personally, we see that she is one heck of a crazy driver, throwing caution and safety out of the window in her haste to reclaim the dogs when they escape her.
There she is, Cruella.
She also has this charming voice provided by the late Betty Lou Gerson, which gives Cruella her diva-like mannerisms. Cruella has her downsides that keep her from getting any higher, but she has enough good traits that put her in this place on the list. Ursula from The Little Mermaid. Ursula is an underwater witch with octopus tentacles for legs who makes a bargain with a mermaid named Ariel into turning her into a human in order to win the love of a charming prince named Eric, but is actually hoping to use Ariel to acquire the magic trident of her father, King Triton. Ursula is sort of like Cruella. They're both diva-like characters who are well-liked by the Disney fandom. But to me, Ursula is also pretty overrated because she has many traits of the typical power-mad villainess.
Flotsam! Jetsam!
I want you to keep an extra close watch on this pretty little daughter of his.
She may be the key to Triton's undoing.
Though unlike Cruella, Ursula does have some more flavor to her. For instance, she has access to many powerful potions that give her an advantage. Plus, she doesn't go for a full frontal assault. She goes for manipulation tactics. While you can clearly see past the veneer of these tactics, mostly because we as the audience already know of her true intentions, her manipulation of Ariel ended up being very easy for her, because Ariel is distraught after her father destroys her personal property, though this has the drawback of Ursula going after low-hanging fruit, especially since Ariel is a teenager who is just asserting her independence from her dad. Plus, she never leaves her lair to check on Ariel to see if Ariel has managed to charm Eric into loving her, instead ordering her eel minions, Flotsam and Jetsam, push her and Eric off a boat ride when they almost kiss, though she does decide to take matters into her own hands when she actually sees that her scheme is close to failing.
Set for sure. Well, it's time Ursula took matters into her own tentacles.
Putting those complaints aside though, Ursula does deserve some credit for doing more in terms of villainy than Cruella. Like, she uses Ariel's voice that the latter gave to her in exchange for being turned human, to become a human herself and use Ariel's voice to hypnotize Eric into marrying her. And truth be told, the scene in question has quite a scary atmosphere to it. Also, when Ursula does manage to get Triton's magic trident, she wastes no time showing how much of a threat she is when being given a powerful artifact.
The sea and all its toils bow to my
power! It's her villain song, Poor Unfortunate Souls. That is the most endearing thing about Ursula, because it's this catchy ditty that really shows how fun and menacing this sea witch is.
Come on, you poor unfortunate soul! Go ahead, make your choice.
Ursula is pretty grandiose and more or less stole the show, but her generic motive for power and not immediately taking action to make sure her scheme doesn't fail does take away some points for her. The Sheriff of Nottingham from Robin Hood. The sheriff is the corrupt law official of the medieval town of Nottingham, whose main concern is collecting tax money from the citizens and giving them to the greedy Prince John, and he constantly tries to capture the honorable thief Robin Hood due to the latter constantly stealing money from him and giving it to the less fortunate. Much like Prince John, the sheriff is a textbook example of someone who abuses his authority for his own benefit. He constantly takes any money he seems, no matter how much of a small amount it is, all for the sake of tormenting individuals who he deems as below him.
It sure is, and I'll just take it for poor Prince John. Every little bit helps.
It's actually his relationship with Robin Hood that I find to be most interesting. The sheriff has sort of become obsessed with catching this rogue, but you can tell it's not just about enforcing Prince John's rule, oh no. It's personal to the sheriff because Robin Hood's elusiveness undermines not only Prince John's authority but also his own. So, it's a matter of pride to the sheriff.
By the way, I hear you're having a bit of trouble getting your hands on that Robin Hood.
He's scared of me, that's what he is. You notice he didn't show up here today.
I think what I personally enjoy about the sheriff is him being given the voice of the southern accented Disney veteran Pat Buttram.
He throws an angry tantrum if he cannot have his way. He calls for mom and sucks his thumb and doesn't want to play. Too late to be known as John the First. He's sure to be known as John the Worst. How about that?
Despite all my praise though, the reason why I didn't rank the sheriff higher on the list is because he mainly serves as an enforcer to Prince John. While he may be more cunning and composed than the childish prince, the fact of the matter is that without his title as sheriff, this guy would just be more of a jerk than an outright bad guy. Plus, you could say that he works better as an allegory against corrupt small-town officials than an outright character. Overall, the Sheriff of Nottingham works pretty well as a villain in Robin Hood, but he is held back by the fact that he's more or less a minion and caricature of a corrupt authority figure. Commander Rourke from Atlantis: The Lost Empire. Lyle Tiberius Rourke is the head of the expedition crew on a journey to find the lost city of Atlantis, relying on the aid of the young linguist Milo Thatch to guide the crew. Soon, though, when they find Atlantis, Rourke reveals his true intentions of robbing Atlantis of its most valuable treasures, one of them being a giant crystal that serves as their life force. Rourke is honestly quite an underrated Disney villain, as Atlantis: The Lost Empire has sort of become obscure since it came out nearly 23 years ago. Rourke is also an early twist villain, and I have to say that there are certain clues that are given to the audience in order for us to see that Rourke has a dark side that he is hiding.
Believe me, this will be small change compared to the value of what we're going to learn on this trip.
Yes, this should be enriching for all of us.
When Rourke comes out as a villain, I'd say that he manages to make the most of his villainy. He kills the king of Atlantis, steals his daughter, and he and his henchmen put up one heck of a fight against the good guys, all without a shred of remorse or insecurity.
Lieutenant!
I also found his character design to be very fitting because he's a man in the military, so it would make sense for someone with his build to be in a position of authority. He can also be a bit of a comedic villain, both before and after the reveal, though most of his comedy stems from making sarcastic quips at his enemy's expense.
Get off your soapbox, Thatch. You've read Darwin. It's called natural selection. We're just helping it along.
If there are any criticisms I have with Rourke, it's that, again, his main motivation is greed, which, if you noticed, has also made him rather stupid. I mean, if all he cared about was getting his paycheck, he could have just sold some pictures of Atlantis rather than just stealing their life force. That, and his defeat at the end, is kind of based on circumstances handed to the protagonists. Rourke is a good and underappreciated Disney twist villain. It's just that he has so much down points that I cannot ignore. Shere Khan from The Jungle Book. Shere Khan is an Indian tiger who hates humans, and when he hears that a young human, Mowgli, is living in the jungle, he sets out to find him and kill him. Shere Khan's most defining characteristics are his elegance and false politeness. He speaks very much like a British gentleman, but you can tell that he is mostly just doing it to mess with his prey.
An extraordinary performance. And thank you for detaining my victim.
We can also kind of see his point on why he hates humans, because they have dangerous tools like fire and guns which could hurt an animal like him. I will also say that Shere Khan owns his nature as a predator. He will gladly hunt and kill everything in his way, regardless how insignificant it may be, which makes him rather unpredictable as we watch him go from a man of elegance to a raving lunatic.
You're trying my patience. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
The one problem I have with Shere Khan is that he only appears in the third half of the film. Sure, the rest of the movie does build him up based on some of the conversations the characters have.
Shere Khan has returned to this part of the jungle. And he has sworn to kill you.
Kill me? But why would he want to do that?
He hates man.
But you'd think he would at least make some kind of appearance at any other point in the story, and he only gets 3 appearances in the back half. The scene where he learns of Mowgli's existence, the scene where he and Kaa have a conversation, and the ending. Not just that, but his big fight at the end is mostly done by some of the other characters, while Mowgli only ties a burning branch on Khan's tail while he's distracted. Shere Khan is a memorable villain, I won't deny it, but you'd think he would have more screen time and his defeat at the end would be more meaningful. Honest John and Gideon from Pinocchio. This fox and cat con artist duo see the living puppet Pinocchio as a means of getting rich and bring him to Stromboli in the hopes of getting paid handsomely. These two are the first antagonists that we see in Pinocchio, and they make quite an impression. They're charismatic and funny, which is probably meant for the movie to still be lighthearted before getting into the more dramatic stuff in the second half. These two have a Tom and Jerry meet Yogi and Boo Boo Bear type of vibe to them. Their scenes are a treat every time they're on screen.
Oh, my goodness! A palpitating syncopation of the Dilladilla with a wicky-wicky stabbing of the Floyd Joy.
These two aren't just humorous villains, though. In one instance, Honest John shows that he was willing to even off somebody if it meant being paid by the coachman. We also see some texture to Honest John in this scene, as he is hesitant to get involved in anything that includes Pleasure Island, though it's mostly because he's afraid of being found out by the authorities.
Pleasure Island. Pleasure Island? But the law! Suppose they...
Though, like what I said about Stromboli a while ago, the biggest reason why they don't rank higher is because they don't appear again after giving Pinocchio to the coachman. They could be out there now, selling other innocent children into slavery. Plus, they also get off scot-free from their transgressions, much like the rest of the Pinocchio villains. Honest John aka J. Worthington Foulfellow and Gideon are enjoyable and pretty decent as antagonists, but their lack of additional appearances along with escaping any kind of penalty don't do them justice. Scar from The Lion King. Scar is the younger brother of Mufasa, the Lion King of the Pride Lands, and wants to take over the place himself. So, he teams up with a band of crazy hyenas and arranges for Mufasa and his son Simba to be killed and inherit the throne. Scar is based off the anti-villain Claudius from the William Shakespeare play, Hamlet, only he is eviler than Claudius. Scar's defining trait is his intellect, as he prefers to use brains over brawn. I think this scene alone says it best.
Well, as far as brains go, I got the lion's share, but when it comes to brute strength, I'm afraid I'm at the shallow end of the gene pool.
Plus, his villain song, Be Prepared, is just so dang catchy and entertaining that you can't help but sing to it once it's over.
So prepare for the coup of the century. Be prepared for the murkiest scam.
I also have to applaud Shakespearean actor Jeremy Irons' voice for Scar. It's a shame he didn't get more A-list animated roles.
Hey, Uncle Scar. Will I like this surprise?
Simba, it's to die for.
The primary reason why Scar isn't any higher on the list is because once he gets to be king, he becomes a lot less interesting. He has transitioned to a cunning villain to a generic power-mad tyrant that you've seen in any other Disney film. Oh, and he mostly sends his hyena minions to do the fighting for him while he doesn't even try to fight unless he knows he has a chance, making him quite pathetic and cowardly, though I will say that his death at the end is quite graphic.
No, let me explain. No, you don't understand. No, I didn't mean... No!
Scar is great in many ways, like his cunning intelligence and having a charismatic voice actor, but his later Flanderization does hold him back from being any higher. The evil queen from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Grimhild is the queen of an unknown kingdom and the stepmother of Princess Snow White. However, she has become jealous of Snow's outer beauty and has made her a scullery maid as a means of getting leverage over her. However, when her magic mirror tells her that Snow White reigns as the fairest in the land, she plots to do away with her stepdaughter by any means necessary. The evil queen deserves some credit for being the very first Disney Animated Studios villain. She proves to be quite the force to be reckoned with as she rules over the land with a tight fist, scaring a hunter into not questioning her order to murder Snow White, and her reputation is even known to the Seven Dwarfs in their cottage.
The queen! What? She's bad. She's highly bean. She's an old witch.
She also has an underground laboratory full of potions that she uses in her schemes, which comes in handy as she transforms into an elderly woman and creates the iconic poison apple to make Snow White fall into a very deep slumber. I also noticed that she has sort of made a switch in personality upon being transformed. She has gone from a cold, serious tyrant to a cackling mad woman who mainly brings out as many laughs as she does scares.
The dwarfs will think she's dead. She'll be buried alive.
Having said all of that though, I will say that the evil queen isn't without her faults. For one thing, despite having a fleshed-out personality, she does sort of fall into the category of a generic villain, though her main motivation being arrogance rather than greed or power does add in a nice spin to that. I also think some things about her go unexplained. Like, how did she marry Snow White's father? And since she died at the end, does Snow White immediately become the new queen of the land? I'll stop now before I go too far. The evil queen does make a great impression due to being the very first Disney animated movie villain, but her lack of a fleshed-out motive as well as being somewhat ambiguous for the audience does make her lose some points. Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. Maleficent is a dark fairy who curses the infant princess, Aurora, to die when she turns 16 years old. In the forthcoming 16 years, Aurora has gone into hiding and Maleficent is on pins and needles on where she could be. When Aurora returns home, Maleficent hypnotizes her into pricking her finger on a magical spinning wheel, and she falls into a deep sleep. Maleficent is seen by many as an A-list Disney villain, and while I can see where people are coming from, I have many reasons why I put her on the 22nd spot. To get the positives out of the way, Maleficent is quite a show-stopping villain, from her fabulous design to her crazy-as-heck magic powers, especially at the end where she turns into a giant fire-breathing dragon. She is also one of the smartest Disney villains. This is shown when she is aware that Merryweather turned her killing curse into a sleeping curse and knows of Aurora's love for Prince Philip and has captured him to make sure there are no loose ends.
Well, this is a pleasant surprise. I set my trap for a peasant, and lo, I catch a prince.
I also have to give credit for actress Eleanor Audley's performance as Maleficent, mostly because she played another Disney villain who I will get to later down on the list.
Did you hear that, my pet? All these years they've been looking for a baby.
Getting to the negatives, though, I will say that Maleficent's endgame sort of makes no sense. She plans on keeping Prince Philip as her prisoner for a century just to see him try and break Aurora's curse as a feeble old man. While it's implied that she will use her magic to keep him from dying of old age, that plan is just impractical since it has no other purpose other than to boost her sadism. Also, her entire villain motivation stems from simply not getting invited to an infant's christening.
Oh, you've got to be kidding.
Sure, as a being of evil, you'd expect her to be petty, but I'm sure that Maleficent has been snubbed on other functions, yet she never cared. Maleficent is a well-known Disney villain, and her reputation precedes her, but she is unfortunately lacking in the good motive or well-thought-out evil plan department. Captain Hook from Peter Pan. Captain James Hook is a pirate obsessed with killing Peter Pan, a young scallywag from the magical world of Neverland where you never age, all on account of Peter dismembering his right hand and causing the pirate to replace his hand with his namesake Hook. Now, this guy is honestly a bit of a mixed bag for me. I think he works well as a comedic villain because he has a lot of funny moments revolving around him.
The cook told me that the first week told him that he had the tiniest banished
He is also shown to be rather dark for a villain who's the butt of many jokes, as many of his evil deeds are super intense, like sicking a bomb on Peter. It's his relationship with TikTok the crocodile that I find interesting, because Peter Pan threw Hook's severed hand to the crocodile and the reptile likes the taste of him so much, he kept on following Hook around to eat him.
Something? No. No.
Getting to his negatives, I will say that Hook can get pretty annoying sometimes. He mostly just whines like a petulant child when things don't go according to plan.
You wouldn't do old Hook in now, would you, lad? I'll go away forever. I'll do anything you say.
It can also get pretty tiring to see him go through many slapstick gags that you might end up getting used to as many pratfalls after the 6th or 7th time. Captain Hook does make for an excellent Disney villain, but his annoying and repetitive tendencies do stop him from getting higher. Governor John Radcliffe from Pocahontas. This pompous, self-involved authority figure leads an expedition of Englishmen to a foreign land where they plan to create a settlement and mine for alleged gold hidden in the ground. When one of his underlings, John Smith, befriends a young native girl named Pocahontas and learns that there is no gold, he begins questioning Radcliffe's authority, much to the latter's dismay. Radcliffe is honestly a little underrated for a Disney villain. He's a textbook example of a total bigot. He has completely convinced himself and his followers that the natives are bloodthirsty people without even bothering to get to know them or even take notice how he and the settlers are taking over the natives' land.
About the natives, I'm counting on you to make sure those filthy heathens don't disrupt our mission.
Well, if they're anything like the savages I've fought before, it's nothing I can't handle.
Right.
He's also one of Disney's most realistic villains, since there have been xenophobic people like Radcliffe that exist in real life and spent their time destroying the lives of the type of people they are against. Also, while Radcliffe is another villain whose main motivation is greed, the film actually adds in some texture to the stock motive by also adding in a motive of power, as Radcliffe only wants gold to feel powerful above everyone else. Plus, he is given a rather charismatic performance by the late David Ogden Stiers, who voiced a bunch of other Disney characters when he was alive.
It's the gold! They have it, and they don't want us to take it from them. Well, I'll just have to take it by force.
The one flaw I have with Radcliffe is that his villain song, Mine, 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 while catchy, sort of hammers in his selfish personality a bit too much and too hard. Overall, John Radcliffe is a great representation about the evils of prejudice and greed, and only has one flaw that can easily be overlooked. Alameda Slim from Home on the Range. Slim is an outlaw who kidnaps cows from various farms, driving them out of business, and dresses up as a wealthy man named Yancey Odell to purchase the farms. Slim has a lot of stuff going for him, like he is able to hypnotize cows by yodeling and has connections to the black market. He also has a very underrated and catchy villain song.
You're looking from a bovine point of view. I sure can yodel, ladle, 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 yodel, ladle, 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 yodel, ladle, ladle, ladle.
Slim also has a very interesting band of henchmen, all of whom have their own personalities. The Willie brothers are a trio of stupid but funny stooges. Junior the Buffalo acts as his lookout. Mr. Wesley is a black market dealer that only the great Steve Buscemi can voice. And Rico is a fake bounty hunter Slim hired to moonlight in order to throw the authorities off his trail. I also think he has a unique design for a Western outlaw. He is this heavily built man who dresses in flashy clothes. He's like an evil combination of The Rock and Elvis. If there are any problems I have with Slim, it would be that his backstory of how he was a farmhand who was judged by his supervisors is briefly glossed over and not elaborated on too much.
Maybe they just didn't like your singing.
My singing?
All in all, Alameda Slim is a villain that has a lot of potential, all things considered. But I wouldn't say that he's an A-list Disney villain. Mother Gothel from Tangled. Gothel is a woman who hoards a magical flower's abilities to heal any ailments to herself to keep herself young forever. When the flower is taken by royal guards to heal the Queen of Corona and the newborn daughter is gifted with the flower's abilities through her hair, Gothel kidnaps the daughter, who she names Rapunzel, and isolates her from the real world by taking her to a hidden tower, where she had kept Rapunzel for 18 straight years. Gothel made quite an impact on audiences when Tangled first came out in 2010. For starters, she is the very definition of a domestic abuser, constantly gaslighting her adopted daughter into being dependent on her. All done with a campy elegance and passive-aggressive motherly attitude.
You know what I see? I see a strong, confident, beautiful young lady. Oh, look, you're here too. I'm just teasing. Stop taking everything so seriously.
Her villain song, Mother Knows Best, is also pretty fun to listen to, and it shows Gothel's manipulations at their finest.
Skip the drama, stay with Mama. Mother knows best.
When Rapunzel runs away, Gothel really shows her villain side when she goes to find her. She manipulates two criminals who were double-crossed by Rapunzel's new friend, Flynn Rider, into assisting her and throwing them under the bus when Rapunzel is brought back to her. Her obsession with maintaining her youth is so exponential that she has become socially withdrawn and mistrustful of others. The only sort of complaint I have with Gothel is that the film seems a bit too on the nose of her hypocrisy. She keeps claiming there are people out there who will use Rapunzel for their selfish wants when really, she fits that description more so than anyone else in the movie, and it sort of becomes tiring after the 5th time she blows that hot air.
I really did try, Rapunzel. I tried to warn you what was out there. The world is dark and selfish and cruel. If it finds even the slightest ray of sunshine, it destroys it.
Mother Gothel is quite a remarkable Disney villain, but not really a villain that I personally would put higher. Te from Moana. Te is a giant, destructive volcano-like entity who is the evil counterpart to the goddess of creation, Te Fiti, who transformed into Te after Maui stole a gemstone that was Te Fiti's heart. I think that this backstory explaining how Te Fiti turned into Te is the most interesting thing about them because it presents this deity version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that sort of keeps you invested in the story. Te is a lot like the Firebird from Fantasia 2000. They're both fire deities who are a natural part of nature, but overdo it with the destruction, though in the case of Te it's mostly because she cannot control herself as her heart being stolen has magically corrupted her. Once Te Fiti's heart is returned, she is turned back to normal, even showing mercy to Maui when he apologizes for stealing her heart, thus giving her a happy ending.
You know, it'd be rude to refuse a gift from a goddess.
If I had to find any criticism amongst Te it's that the movie tries to make her true identity a mystery. But given that the flashback shown a darkness coming in just as Maui leaves Te Fiti, I'd say this was a bit of a dead giveaway. Overall, Te works well in the lore of Moana as a being of destruction as well as being the evil counterpart of a benevolent goddess, though could have had more mystery done to her. Chernabog from Fantasia. Chernabog is a demonic being who unleashes a group of souls and demons and brings them up top to his home of Bald Mountain in order to dance restlessly in his honor. Chernabog has basically been compared to the devil himself and is even referred to as such when his segment in Fantasia is introduced. And I will admit, this guy does have some Beelzebub-like qualities to him, what with his appearance and how his little minions sort of look like something out of the underworld. I also think the visuals revolving around Chernabog are pretty impressive all things considered, since his segment in Fantasia was the ending one and it's clear the people at Disney wanted to end the movie on a high note. Plus, the fact that Chernabog doesn't really do anything that can be considered bad other than summon some ghost and mess around with his minions isn't really the point of him. It's what he represents symbolically as a being of evil that's the main purpose of Chernabog, and I think it's safe to say he manages to do that. Heck, even his defeat at the end seems like a good defeats evil kind of deal. The only drawback I have to say about Chernabog is that he's part of a segment rather than a movie. Yes, as I said before, Fantasia is more known for visuals rather than storytelling, but one can't help but be curious to see how this guy would work as a movie villain. Chernabog works well as a villain in a symbolic sense, but did have potential as a full movie villain that wasn't met. Man from Bambi. Man is an unseen hunter who the animals of the forest fear with all their hearts. Now, Man is an interesting villain. By that, I mean he is a villain who does not make an appearance. However, like what I said with Chernabog, it's what Man represents that's the main selling point. He exists as this entity of fear for the animals because he is a hunter and the animals fear for their lives whenever his presence becomes known to them.
Almost here. I can't stand it any longer.
Plus, there's the fact that he is backed up by a pack of demonic-looking dogs and even started a forest fire, both of which added in some very dark moments for a lighthearted film like Bambi. All these things and more really set up how much man and humans in general can be seen as monsters for animals given how their status as hunters is a danger to their well-being. One flaw I must point out about this villain, however, is his status as an invisible force. Despite what I just said as how this works well symbolically, it kind of sets of some viewers' imagination as to what this person looks like. To conclude, man is quite a representation of the evils of humans hunting animals with many things to back up his threat, but it wouldn't hurt to actually show him in his physical force. Sykes from Oliver and Company. Sykes is a ruthless loan shark who at one point has given a large sum of profits to a beggar named Fagin and is anxious that the poor man pay him back, with the serious threat of killing him should he not meet his demands. Now, the reason I put Sykes this high on the list is because of how much of a realistic man he is. I don't necessarily mean that in personality, but I mean that Sykes is sort of the type of person who is out there in the world. Loan sharks are people who do lend money but are also criminals who would not hesitate to kill others when they don't pay back the money that they give them. People like Fagin, an exceedingly poor man, are the type of people who do depend on Sykes in order to survive, which makes his desperation to pay Sykes back all the more frightening.
Three? Oh, you mean just 3 days? Oh my goodness! Oh, I'm having a bad day!
Sykes has a lot more things to like about him. For one thing, he approaches people in a professional, calm manner, most likely to lure them in a false sense of security, and that calmness is also present when Sykes decides to get violent.
Do you know what happens when I don't see my money, Fagin? People get hurt.
I also like his henchmen, two vicious pet Doberman pinschers named Roscoe and DeSoto who fit the stereotype of New York gangsters something fierce.
Hey, you got something to say to me, fat boy? Come on, man, you got no scare me. Come on, I'll kill your boss, man. Come on, I'll kill. Go ahead.
And I also think that his performance by Italian-American actor Robert Loggia adds into his mobster identity since Loggia was well known for appearing in crime movies. Plus, unlike most Disney antagonists, he carries around an actual gun in order to threaten others, showing how much this guy means business. I'd put Sykes higher on the list, but there is a problem to being a realistic villain, his main motivation of money. I won't say anything else because you might know where I'm going with this. To conclude, Sykes' strong point is being one of the more realistic Disney villains, but doesn't really have much beyond that. Jafar from Aladdin. Jafar is the royal advisor of the Sultan who plots to overthrow him to take over the kingdom of Agrabah by attempting to acquire a magic lamp containing a genie and uses a street-smart petty thief named Aladdin to get the lamp from the mystical Cave of Wonders. Jafar is one of Disney's iconic villains for sure. From his extravagant appearance to his smarmy personality, to having one of the best Disney minions that was ever made.
Is only essential. We gotta travel light. Bring the guns, the weapons, the knives. And how about this picture? I don't know. I think I'm making a weird face in it.
Jafar is backed up by his serpent staff, which he uses to hypnotize the Sultan into following his orders so that his evil plans can go off without a hitch.
The diamond. Here, Jafar.
He is also capable of adapting to backup plans, like when Iago suggests marrying Jasmine to become the Sultan, Jafar immediately grasps onto the idea, regardless of whether or not if Jasmine is interested.
Father, I choose Prince Ali.
Prince Ali?
When Jafar does get his hands on the genie's lamp, he immediately stops holding back and goes full crazy villain, complete with a very sinister reprise of one of the movie's most catchy songs.
Yes, meet a blast from your past, whose lies were too good to last. Say hello to your precious Prince Ali!
The one downside Jafar has is that, while more fleshed out than other examples, he has the generic motive of wanting more power, which has become an overdone cliché by today's standards. Jafar is memorable in every way. I just wish he was given more flavor in terms of motivation. The coachman from Pinocchio. This guy is a shady figure who leads wayward delinquents to a fun place called Pleasure Island, a hidden amusement park where kids can create mischief all they want without having to worry about getting into trouble. But it turns out the island has a curse that turns any misbehaving boy into a donkey, and the coachman collects them to sell to the highest bidder. The coachman stands out as the evilest character in Pinocchio, and anyone who has bothered to see the film and know of his actions wouldn't be surprised that I referred to him as such. He lures naughty children to a place that meets their troublemaking standards, and I'll admit, Pleasure Island does seem like the kind of place any young scallywag wouldn't hesitate to go to just to do whatever they want.
What you ever seen? Come in and pick a fight, boys.
Oh boy, a scrap! Come on, let's go in and poke somebody in the nose.
Why?
Just for the fun of it.
Okay, Lampy.
Plus, his trafficking scheme may be rather fantastical, but it does sort of deliver a stranger danger message to any child who feels too restricted by their parents and wants to have more freedom in life. While being allowed freedom isn't necessarily bad, the movie does point out how trusting strangers to give you freedom can be dangerous. The coachman is also quite cunning and intelligent in his schemes. For starters, he separates donkeys that can still speak from the ones that can't and places them in a corral in order to avoid them selling him out to the police. He's also frightening enough to scare Honest John and Gideon into being compliant with his schemes.
They never come back as boys.
Like the rest of the villains, though, the main reason why I don't put him any higher is that he actually escapes justice for his crimes. While you could leave it up to interpretation that Pinocchio might have told the cops about Pleasure Island, I wish we could still see the coachman get his just desserts. To conclude, the coachman is a villain that is basically evil incarnate, but his lack of a comeuppance prevents him from getting any higher. Dr. Facilier from The Princess and the Frog. Dr. Facilier, aka the Shadow Man, is a witch doctor from the early 20th century New Orleans who kidnaps the carefree Prince Naveen and turns him into a frog, and has his manservant Lawrence pose as him to marry the heiress Charlotte Laboeuf and kill her father in order to steal the Laboeuf fortune. Facilier is quite a Disney villain, let me tell you. He's this sneaky, charismatic con artist who uses witchcraft in order to cheat people out of their money. His name means easy in French, and most of his villainous acts are a representation of taking the easy way out.
We got magic, good and bad. Make you happy or make you real sad. Get everything you want, lose what you had. Down here in New Orleans.
Facilier also has contacts with otherworldly beings who supply him with voodoo charms to further his goals, and I won't lie, these otherworldly beings are pretty darn frightening.
I hear you.
There are two things about Dr. Facilier that I think are his strongest aspects. One of them is that he is played by the always charismatic Keith David, whose own smooth voice suits Dr. F to a T.
And you have all the wayward souls your dark little heart's desire. You'll love that, don't you?
The other is that his villain song, Friends on the Other Side, is quite the showstopper, as it is very jazzy and upbeat while maintaining a spooky atmosphere.
I got voodoo, I got hoodoo, I got things I ain't even tried. And I got friends on the other side.
He's got friends on the other side.
The only complaint I have with Dr. Facilier is that he doesn't really interact much with the film's main protagonist Tiana, because he's more focused on Prince Naveen. Yes, they do have a scene together near the end, but it feels kind of sudden, all things considered.
Come on now, darling. Think of everything you've sacrificed.
Girl, all you ever do is work. I told y'all she wouldn't come.
To conclude, Dr. Facilier is memorable with his voodoo magic and charming appeal, but has one drawback that doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things. King Runerd from Frozen 2. King Runerd is the grandfather of Elsa and Anna and the founder of the Kingdom of Arendelle. A long time ago, Runerd instigated a peace treaty with the indigenous Northuldra, people who lived in a magical forest, by constructing a dam. But in reality, he was very paranoid that the Northuldra would rise up against him and built the dam to weaken their resources so they would depend on him. To get the elephant out of the room, Runerd is an example of a villain whose actions reign supreme long after their death, because the conflict in Frozen 2 is a result of this guy's machinations, though it does sort of explain how Elsa got her ice powers, so there's that. However, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because the impact that villains had can still reign even after they're gone, and Runerd is a prime example of this because he started a war between Arendelle and the Northuldra, which caused an unrest of the forest spirits, who proceeded to cut off the forest from the rest of the world.
The spirits then vanished, and a powerful mist covered the forest. locking everyone out.
What I like most about Reunard is how information about his evil doing is slowly given to the audience bit by bit, all culminating in Elsa seeing an ice manifestation of her granddad explaining his plans to a subordinate.
Magic makes people feel too powerful, too entitled. It makes them think they can defy the will of a king.
I think Reunard works well as a fable to not let anyone's fear of the unknown consume them. We as human beings do tend to fear things that we have no knowledge of and therefore are prone to assume the worst. Reunard also works well as remembering past traumas because there have been events in the past that people do tend to ignore or wash over on account of how much of a sensitive subject they are. Reunard is a textbook example of a posthumous bad guy and how his actions have ended up causing harm to others long term. Yzma from The Emperor's New Groove. Yzma is the royal advisor to the pompous teenage ruler of an empire named Kuzco, who discharges Yzma due to repeated attempts to rule the empire when he is indisposed. Wanting to get even, Yzma plots to poison Kuzco with a potion, but her slow-witted sidekick Kronk mixes up the poison with a llama potion and Kuzco is therefore turned into a llama. Yzma is one of the memorable Disney villains due to how stomach-bustingly hilarious she is. Nearly every scene she's in has her involved in some kind of comedic scenario that you can't help but laugh your head off at. The most blatant example of this is this scene.
Pull the lever, Kronk.
Her voice actress, late comedian Eartha Kitt, is clearly having fun behind the microphone, because she delivers nearly all of Yzma's lines with this bombastic flamboyance.
Our moment of triumph approaches! It's dinner time!
I think it's Yzma's relationships with Kuzco and Kronk that are the most standout examples of her character. She hates Kuzco with a burning passion, not just because that he fired her, but also because she knows that his narcissistic tendencies have made him quite an irresponsible ruler. And in all fairness, we can see where she's coming from because Kuzco really needs a maturity lesson since he's basically let his power and privilege go to his head.
No! You threw off my groove!
I'm sorry, but you've thrown off the Emperor's groove.
Though she sort of serves as a lesson for Kuzco because she is just as if not even more of a selfish, vile person and would most definitely rule the empire even more badly than Kuzco had she fully taken over the throne. As for Kronk, she serves as the straight man to his comic relief. She gets constantly annoyed with Kronk's ditzy behavior, and this leads to many funny moments when the two share a scene together.
How about dessert?
Well, I suppose there's time for dessert.
And coffee.
All right, a quick cup of coffee. Then take him out of town and finish the job.
Despite her comedic nature, though, Yzma has proven to be very dangerous. She has an entire underground lab full of potions that turn people into animals and even keeps a dagger underneath her dress. Alongside assembling the palace guards once Kuzco and Pasha enter her lab.
Kill them! They murdered the Emperor!
No, wait, I'm the Emperor! It's me, Kuzco!
One thing that stops Yzma from getting any higher are the constant jokes about her age. I mean, the first 3 times were pretty amusing, but the movie just seems to get a kick out of making fun of Yzma's elderly physique, which could be seen as insensitive to any elder who faces similar ridicule. That one complaint aside though, Yzma is pretty dang funny for a villain, but also proves to be a force to be reckoned with. Professor Ratigan from The Great Mouse Detective. Professor Ratigan is a criminal mastermind rodent who plots to rule over all of the mice in the Great Britain by kidnapping a toymaker named Hiram Flavorsham to create a robot doubleganger of the Queen in order for it to dub him as the new regent, and has a personal rivalry with the mouse detective, Basil of Baker Street. Ratigan is truly the definition of a villainous mastermind. He comes up with quite an intelligent scheme in order to achieve power and has a gang of ruffians backing him up, most notably the creepy and comical flightless bat, Fidget.
And you know what to do and no mistakes.
Ratigan also owns his villainy, and you can tell that he is having fun as a bad guy, doing every evil deed with a sense of excitement to him, and it's this unapologetic cruelty that makes him so fun to watch, complete with a great performance by horror icon Vincent Price.
96. A heavy tax to be levied against all parasites and sponges, such as the elderly, the infirm, and especially little children.
His villain song, The World's Greatest Criminal Mind, is also quite a show-stopping musical number. It's very catchy and upbeat, while having some dark moments sprinkled throughout.
Even meaner, you made it. Worse than the widows and orphans you drowned. You're the best of the worst around. Oh, Radigan! Oh, Radigan!
Radigan is also shown to be very cunning when dealing with opposition, like threatening Flaversham's daughter, Olivia, should he decide to back out of the plan, and tricking Basil and Dawson into falling into a trap and humiliating Basil to make him lose confidence into stopping him.
The superior mind has triumphed. I've won!
When his scheme falls apart, Radigan slowly loses his sanity, up to the point where he becomes more animal-like when he chases Basil and Big Ben.
No escape this time, Basil.
The only grievance I have with Radigan is that whole running gag about how he doesn't appreciate being called a rat, despite actually being a rat. You'd think that since he owns his villain identity, such a statement wouldn't bother him. Despite that, Radigan is quite a slimy villain in all the right ways, and Disney really brought their A-game when writing him. John Silver from Treasure Planet. John Silver is the cook of a spaceship full of voyagers who go on a search for the legendary Treasure Planet, a robotic planet that houses a large bounty of riches stolen by the legendary pirate, Captain Flint. However, Silver soon instigates a mutiny with the other crew members. Silver has a lot of things going for him in terms of being a villain. For one thing, his design as a cyborg has this impressive-looking, cyberpunk-styled motif that makes him look like a futuristic pirate, and the fact that it's all animated in CGI is a nice touch.
Cyborg.
The most interesting thing about Silver, though, is his complex morality. Despite being obsessed with the treasure, you can tell that he has developed an affection for his new cabin boy, Jim Hawkins, who is suffering from confidence issues on account of his father walking out on him and his mother when he was very young, and it's these conflicting priorities that really shape him up as one of Disney's more complicated villains.
You listen to me, James Hawkins. You got the makings of greatness in you, but you gotta take the helm and chart your own course.
When he does find the treasure, the whole planet is set to self-destruct, and this is where his true loyalties shine, as he has to choose between either Jim or a boat full of treasure.
Oh, blast me for a boat!
I will also say that his escape from justice at the end does sort of feel earned, because he chose to save someone he's grown to care for and has helped him escape certain death. Not to mention giving Jim some treasure he kept to help fix his mother's in that he and his crew destroyed near the beginning of the film.
Stay out of trouble, you old scalawag.
Why, Jimbo lad, when have I ever done otherwise?
If I had to find any fault with Silver, it's that he looks and sounds too much like an old-style pirate. If you can ignore the futuristic gimmicks, he's basically a typical pirate that you can find in any treasure-hunting movie. Putting that aside, though, John Silver does make for a villain who has so much emotional depth that you can't help but love him. Hades from Hercules. Hades is the Greek god of the underworld who wants to take over as head god on Mount Olympus. When he is told that the son of his brother Zeus, Hercules, may cause his plan to fail, he sends his two imp minions, Pain and Panic, to turn Hercules mortal and kill him. 18 years later, he finds out that they failed. He tries desperately to kill Herc in order for his plan to go on without a hitch. The main appeal about Hades is his fast-talking charisma, given to us by the quirky James Woods, who has said that he based Hades off a used car salesman.
So, here's the deal. Zeus. Mr. High and Mighty, Mr. Hey You, get off of my cloud. Now he has...
I also think that Hades has an interesting design for an evil god. He's this grayish-looking thug with flame for hair that changes depending on his mood, and wears a scary-looking robe. I also found his supernatural abilities to be very amazing. Like, he can turn his arms into smoke and has some pyrokinetic abilities that he uses whenever he needs to let some anger out.
Nice shooting, Rex.
Hades also proves to be quite an intelligent villain. He immediately uses one of his minions, a mortal named Meg, to seduce Hercules in order to find out his weakness, and soon finds out that she alone is his weakness, causing him to hold her hostage and agree not to harm her in exchange for Hercules to give up his godlike strength so that he can initiate his takeover of Mount Olympus.
Yes, we're there!
One last praiseworthy thing about Hades is that he has a gang of monsters at his side known as the Titans, a group of elemental giants who wreak havoc among the mortals that Zeus imprisoned. And these guys are quite menacing with both their powers and their design.
Susie, I'm home!
The only complaint I have with Hades is that he doesn't make sure to check and see if pain and panic had killed Hercules when he was an infant, or see if Hercules is still weakened from their deal in order to make sure there are no loose ends. Getting past all that, however, Hades stands out as one of Disney's most likable and charming villains and has a lot of stuff to back up his bravado. Judge Claude Frollo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Frollo is a court minister who commands a great deal of authority in medieval Paris and has a great disdain for gypsies, as he labels them as inherently bad people based on prejudice and keeping a narrow mind. He is also the adopted father of Quasimodo, a deformed human who Frollo keeps on a tight leash and has him stay in the bell tower of Notre Dame after killing his mother at the start of the movie. The main point about Frollo is that he is unable to see any fault within him and has fully convinced himself that everything he does is in the name of God, making him the very definition of a religious fanatic, even though all the acts he does is not within biblical standards. It's this self-righteousness that's his biggest strength, because since he refuses to second-guess his actions, he has a take-no-prisoners kind of mentality when doing his deeds, and no greater example of that is searching for the gypsy woman Esmeralda when she goes missing after escaping Notre Dame after claiming sanctuary.
20 pieces of silver for the gypsy Esmeralda. Take them away.
Frollo is also one of the more realistic Disney baddies. There are people in the world who are so blindly devoted to their religion that they refuse to question their loyalties to it when doing bad deeds in the name of them, because doing so might end up being a sin to them. Plus, the great Tony Jay, who died nearly 18 years ago, was a great casting choice for Frollo, because it's his calm elegance and self-assured tone that really shape up Frollo's evil personality.
I should have known you'd risk your life to save that gypsy witch, just as your own mother died trying to save you. What?
Going back to what I said about how Frollo's self-righteous attitude is his biggest strength, it's also his biggest weakness. Because he's so insistent that his way of thinking isn't faulty, he ends up making enemies out of people who know better than him, most importantly the Archdeacon, who appears to be the only one who is able to keep Frollo in line.
Frollo, you will not touch her.
Don't worry. Minister Frollo learned years ago to respect the sanctity of the church.
Another weakness he has is his lustful feelings for Esmeralda. He both resents her for being a gypsy but becomes enamored by her beauty that he becomes obsessed with having her as his significant other, and even threatens her life if she does not submit to him at one point.
Time has come, gypsy. You stand upon the brink of the abyss. Yet even now it is not too late. I can save you from the flames of this world and the next. Choose me or the fire.
The only sort of grievance I have with Frollo is that his villain song, Hellfire, while not a bad song, feels a bit too on the nose about his religious hypocrisy and his sexual feelings for Esmeralda, things we as the audience already know about.
Hellfire, dark fire, now gypsy, it's your turn. Choose me or your pyre.
Putting that aside, however, Frollo is a villain that we all can love to hate in many ways. Gaston from Beauty and the Beast. Gaston is a muscular and handsome, but incredibly conceited hunter who is popular among the citizens of a small provincial town. He sets his sights on marrying a beautiful woman named Belle, who is anything but thrilled at the idea. After getting rejected by Belle when he proposes to her, Gaston decides to have her dad Maurice committed to an asylum when he tries to tell everyone in the town that Belle has been taken prisoner by a humanoid beast who lives in a hidden castle in the forest. Gaston is basically the muscular hunk who tries to get a girl he has the hots for and only sees her as a prize to be won. Not a real person and gets unsurprisingly turned down.
So, how'd it go?
I'll have Belle for my wife. Make no mistake about that.
Gaston also has a song that's meant to stroke his ego, and it is as fun as said ego and shows why the audience is meant to like him that way.
No one's big like Gaston, fucking big like Gaston. No one's got us well cleft in his jib like Gaston.
As a specimen, yes, I'm intimidated.
His plan to coerce Belle into marrying him proves that Gaston is just as much brains as he is brawn. This gives him much more dimension as a villain and is also a nice change of pace from the typical dumb muscle guy.
So you want me to throw her father into the asylum unless she agrees to marry you?
It's his fight with the beast that shows how far Gaston will go to make Belle his wife, since it's at this point in the movie. Gaston's obsession with Belle has driven him to complete insanity. I'd also like to take a moment to point out the difference between Gaston and the Beast. You see, to anyone who has never seen the movie, the Beast at the beginning was selfish, cruel, foul-tempered, and impatient, basically a worse version of Gaston. However, his time with Belle has made him give up these toxic personality traits. Since Gaston did not get this character development, he has become more of a beast than the Beast himself, resulting in a very intense battle sequence.
It's over, Beast! Belle is mine!
A complaint I have with Gaston is that his popularity among his and Belle's town isn't developed strongly. Everyone seems to like him just for story convenience. That aside, Gaston is a being of toxic masculinity who is so entertaining that, like his narcissism, you just can't get enough of him. Tamatoa from Moana. Tamatoa is a giant coconut crab who hoards a great load of valuable objects onto his shell and lives in the realm of monsters called Lolotai. One of the objects on his shell is a magic hook that belongs to the demigod Maui, prompting the demigod and a teenage Polynesian girl named Moana to venture into Lolotai to retrieve the hook, but have to deal with the greedy crab. When Moana came out nearly 8 years ago, Tamatoa became quite the most popular character in the whole movie, and for good reason. He has this showman-like charm that keeps you engaged in him. He was said by the filmmakers to be based on British musician David Bowie, and the materials that Tamatoa has, from his villain song Shiny to his flamboyance, to a brilliant performance by New Zealand actor who bases his material on Bowie, Jermaine Clement, really shows that they really wanted to make this guy as Bowie-based as possible.
I'd rather be shiny like a treasure from a sunken pirate wreck. Scrub the deck and make it look shiny.
He also serves as a juxtaposition of the movie's lesson about knowing who you truly are inside, as Tamatoa believes that you are only worth something if you have a great appearance. This spurning of the film's message has also caused him to attack Maui's confidence when his attempts to fight Tamatoa fall flat. It's Tamatoa's narcissism that's his biggest weakness, which is pretty interesting and adds texture to him. Like, when he captures Moana, she distracts him by trying to get him to boast about himself. What is his response?
Are you just trying to get me to talk about myself? Because if you are, I will gladly do so.
Not just that, but his greed on putting the treasure that he collected on his shell ends up being too heavy for him when Moana and Maui escape, showing the audience what happens when you put too much focus on your vanity.
Hey! Hey! Did you like the song?
I wish he had more screen time though, because he appears for at least 6 minutes and most of the scene revolves around Tamatoa singing his song. Regardless, Tamatoa proves to be a welcome addition to the film, and if you want to know more about him, see YouTuber Shafrilla's hour-long video about Tamatoa and how grand of a character he is. King Candy from Wreck-It Ralph. King Candy is the ruler of the game, Sugar Rush, who refuses to let an NCP character named Vanellope von Schweetz race due to being a glitch and is fearful to how it will affect the game. King Candy proves to be one of Disney's most interesting twist villains and is actually an example of how to do a twist villain right. When King Candy is first introduced, he isn't seen as a bad guy, but more of a goofy but anxious and strict ruler who only wants to do what is best for the people in his game. Heck, he even gives a seemingly legit reason as to why Vanellope cannot race when being confronted by Ralph.
And when they see her glitching and twitching and just being herself, they'll think our game is broken. We'll be put out of order for good. All my subjects will be homeless.
Despite this seemingly benevolent reason, we do notice that King Candy's good intentions aren't all that consistent. For one thing, he tells Ralph that he is unable to give back his medal since it's now part of the game's code. But in a later scene, we see Candy venturing to the code room to get the medal and gives it to Ralph soon after, which makes us question, why didn't he just do this in the first place? Also, we do notice some clues that hint of his true identity. What is his true identity, you may ask? Well, if you've never seen the film before...
Spoiler alert!
What the? Who are you?
I'm Turbo, the greatest racer ever!
To anyone who's bothered to see the film, you'd notice that throughout it, the phrase "going turbo" has been said again and again. This is because it alludes to a previous game character in the arcade called Turbo, who abandoned his game when another was getting more attention, and his attempts to take over that game led to both his and that one being decommissioned. Not just that, but some subtle clues sprinkled throughout the feature does sort of indicate that King Candy isn't really a primary member of Sugar Rush. I can also appreciate that his design and mannerisms were based off the Mad Hatter from Disney's adaptation of Alice in Wonderland. It must have been quite the task to make a wacky character become a full-on bad guy, especially in the end when he gets fused with a cybug from the game Ralph got his medal from Hero's Duty.
Welcome to the boss level!
Turbo!
Because of you, Ralph, I'm now the most powerful virus in the arcade!
One thing that stops me from putting King Candy higher on the list is that since he has access to a video game code world and can just manipulate the game to his liking, he sort of has an unfair advantage against the heroes, though this is sort of mitigated on how he doesn't utilize this a lot. Anyway, King Candy is an example of how to do a twist villain and has rewatch value to anyone who wants to go back and see the little clues that do give him away as Turbo. Lady Tremaine from Cinderella. Lady Tremaine is the stepmother of the title character as she married her rich father. Once her dad died, Tremaine revealed herself to be a cold, mean-spirited woman who was utterly jealous of Cinderella's beauty and kindness and sought to humiliate and bring down Cinderella by making her the maid of her father's home. Once she used up all of her dad's financial resources, all while trying to turn her spoiled daughters and Cinderella's stepsisters into proper ladies to be integrated into high society. You might be wondering why, out of every Disney villain, that I would give Lady Tremaine the #1 spot. Well, I would like to point out that Lady Tremaine is the most realistic out of all the Disney villains. Despite all the Disney antagonists having some kind of fantastical element to back up their villainy, and even some that have a realistic edge to them, none of them compared to how much of an everyday evil that this pompous middle-aged woman is. She is a social climber, the kind of person who puts reputation and status above everything and everyone. With that context, it's easy to see why she married Cinderella's father. It was for his money and also for being a nobleman. She also seems to know how to intimidate Cinderella into taking all the abuse she and her daughters give her, showing how much of a tight fist she has over Cinderella.
Oh yes, and the tapestries, and the draperies.
But I just finished.
Do them again!
It should be noted that she doesn't really treat her own daughters, Anastasia and Drizella, any better. She spoils them with expansive clothing and attempts to marry them off to people of upper class. They're not really family to her, just pawns that she can use in order to get into higher society. Going back to what I said about her intimidating Cinderella, Lady Tremaine shows that she can be a very intimidating woman to the audience. This is proven when she connects the dots that Cinderella danced with the prince that night at the ball, and she silently walks up to her room in order to deal with her, resulting in a very disturbing method of the phrase show, don't tell. I also find her sadism in the way she treats Cinderella to be frighteningly real, as well, since a majority of real-life people do make others miserable for their own amusement. In fact, she's so intent on making her stepdaughter's life a misery that when she comes to try on the glass slipper near the end, Lady Tremaine deliberately trips a royal servant in order for the slipper to break. She also has a pet cat named Lucifer, who she enables to torment Cinderella as much as she and her daughters do. One complaint I have with her is that other than losing Cinderella at the end when she marries the prince, she doesn't really get any consequences. I guess this is because her abuse to Cinderella happened behind closed doors, but you'd think she would get some lasting comeuppance. To conclude both this entry and the list as a whole, Lady Tremaine is a frightening example of a realistic domestic abuser and someone who puts her focus on social standing. Well, that's the end. I hope you guys enjoyed both my list and the videos. I'm Shane Vance, and I will see you later.